Good evening, family. I'm Justin. I'm a heroin addict.
Hey, Justin.
Just a couple reminders. There's a $5 suggested donation. If you have it, please donate. We also have food for free and drinks for sale. All proceeds will go towards the Events and Activities Committee Fund, so we can do more events like this. Tonight, nobody upstairs, nobody downstairs. This is about the only space in the facility we're allowed to use, so please respect it. Don't go out that rear entrance over there. There are Rottweilers that are not friendly. In respect to the atmosphere of recovery, we ask if you have any side conversations to please take them outside and not into the hallway or the kitchen, because you can be disruptive to the speakers. Our next panel that is up is going to be about a little bit of the history of Heroin Anonymous in the Capital District and how HA changed my life. And we have 3 good panel speakers for you, and our first speaker is going to be Tyler.
Hi, I'm Tyler. I'm a heroin addict.
Hi, Tyler.
So all 3 of us have like a topic we're supposed to speak on first in mind. My topic was when Abby met Bill W. It's from the Bill story in the Big Book, and you're probably like, how does that relate to HA? We use the Big Book in HA, and without like the story like I'm going to talk about, like without that happening, this probably wouldn't happen, and I probably wouldn't be sober, and a lot of people wouldn't be sober. So, in Bill's story, Bill's alcoholic, and right at like the end of his drinking, where he's like at his worst, an old friend who was Abby Thatcher called him up, and the next day or whatever, Abby went to Bill's house, and so Abby had gotten sober like a few months before like this meeting, and basically he was like about to go to jail, where two guys from a group called the Oxford Group like met him at court and helped him get sober. And the Oxford Group was some of the principals from AA were from the Oxford Group, like the 3rd step, the 4th step, the 9th step, or like from there. And but the Oxford Group was mostly focused on like Christianity, and so Abby got sober through the Oxford Group. And actually I read Bill's story before I came, and like I just did some like research online about Abby, and it's actually pretty interesting. He grew up in Albany. His parents were like really wealthy. His family, like 3 of his relatives were mayors of the city of Albany. He's buried around here, and Thatcher Park was actually named after his uncle. So I don't know, I thought that was cool. But anyway, so Abby was alcoholic. He got sober through the Oxford Group. He was an old drinking buddy of Bill Wilson, and so and they both drank alcoholically. So when Abby went over to Bill's house, Bill was like at the end of his drinking. It had gotten to like he said he had gotten to like the most hopeless part of his drinking, and Abby came over and sat down with him, and Bill passed him a drink, and he refused it. And like what I got from it was like Bill once drank like Abby did, and he passed him a drink, and he refused it, and that's like where he didn't recognize Abby, and he talks about like a look in Abby's eyes, that he's seen he's changed. And so Abby basically goes on and tells him like how he got sober, and Bill listens to it, and it gives him some hope, and he learned about how he got sober. And Bill went out and drank after that, and then he ended up in the hospital again, where Abby visited him again, and then that's where they started doing the steps, like the steps they had at that point, because this was before AA, obviously, and they started working the steps and building like the whole Christianity part, and that's where he kind of chose like in AA, like his own conception of a higher power. And like at that hospital, after working those steps, he worked like a third step, fourth step, and like became willing to make amends. And like after that, he had like his spiritual experience, where for him it was like a white light spiritual experience. And like from then he hadn't had a drink until he died since then. And like the whole purpose of like Abby meeting Bill was like, that's like how this thing works. We tell each other, we share like what happened, and we can relate to each other. Like I'm sure I'm a heroin addict, just like a lot of you guys were. I can share my story, and like you guys can relate to it, and then you can see the hope, like that there is a way out of this thing. And that's what I thought like Bill saw in Abby. Like they used to drink together, and Abby was able to get sober through this, and he was a changed person from the steps. It's just how it works. Freely giving away like what we've got in here, and like Bill Wilson like continued to tell his story, help other people get sober so they could tell their story and help other people get sober. And like now we can tell our story in HA and help heroin addicts stay sober. And I read something else, like Abby didn't stay sober like the whole for the rest of his life. He had a lot of relapses, and like Bill like still considered him his sponsor, even through his relapses. And there was a quote like he was saying, without Abby there would be no HA, because he was the one who gave Bill hope when he didn't have any. So that's it. That's all I have.
Thanks, Tyler. I'm Brian. I'm a heroin addict.
Hi, Brian.
Like Tyler touched on, why are we sitting up here talking about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous? And I think that's just if we don't know and respect our roots, like we're going to die, right? And I gotta understand like how my life was saved 80 years before I was even born, and I have to appreciate that, and I have to respect that. And so like what Tyler talked about, he Bill met Abby, and he got sober, right? And he did the tenets of the Oxford group, which were modified a little bit later on and changing the 12 steps. And so through that work, the obsession to drink and use went away for Bill, right? And so now what, right? So he spent all my time drinking, and they had to figure out what to do now. And like Abby had showed him, I have to give this away or I'm not going to keep it. I gotta, like the obsession to be lifted was fleeting if I don't do something about it. And so they tried together to do stuff with that, and they had a different approach. They basically would like just go into hospitals, grab alcoholics like off the streets and in hospitals, and like throw them in their house and be like, sober up. And it didn't work, like these people just kept getting drunk, and Abby and Bill were getting discouraged. And about 4 or 5 months after Bill met Abby or left the hospital, a free man, he had to take a trip. He was going to Akron, Ohio, and he was hoping to become the president of this company that was going through this trouble with their stocks. So he went out there, didn't know anybody, 4 months sober, and he had no idea how he was going to stay sober. And he's sitting there waiting to take over this company, and it's not going too well, and just lost. I just went to Akron, Ohio this past summer, and today there's not a lot to do in Akron, Ohio, right? So, 80 years ago, or 1935, I'm assuming there was a lot less to do in Akron, Ohio. And so he didn't know what he was going to do. And he's in the hotel, and he's just basically staying in this hotel and staying in this hotel. And there's a bar in the hotel. And it's late. He's restless, irritable, and discontented. And he's looking at the bar, and he's like, well, I could just go in the bar, and I could sit down, and I could not drink, but I could, like, kind of steal some of the, the fun that's going on at the bar, and that would be okay. And he started walking towards the bar, and he's like, what the hell am I thinking, right? Like, I walk in that bar, I'm going to be drunk, this business is over, like everything's over. And as he truly believed that to drink was to die. So freaked out, he ran to the phone booth, and he went in the phone booth, and he found local church, started calling churches and been like, hey, do you know any drunks? I need to talk to an alcoholic. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? Like, nobody wants to talk to alcoholics. And he's like, well, I'm trying to stay sober, and this is how I stay sober. So finally this lady was like, yeah, this nun, I got this guy, he's about lost everything. Let me see if he'll talk to you. She called the guy's wife, and she was like, yeah, of course. I'd love Bill to come over, talk to my husband. He wasn't too excited about it, but he agreed to meet Bill for like 15 minutes. And so that guy is Dr. Bob. And so Bill goes over to the house. He talks to him. The guy's like, hey, listen, I'm going to talk to you, but in like 15 minutes, I'm going to go. And or you got to go, or whatever it was. And they ended up speaking for hours. And Dr. Bob was like, what blew his mind was what Bill had taken from Dr. Silkworth, that the idea that the first drink is the problem, right? He didn't understand that we have a disease, and then when we put that first drink in, that disease gets activated. Bill, at this point, Bob has been in touch with the Oxford group. He has seen the tenets. He, thought that this could work for him, but it wasn't working because he didn't know that he had to avoid the first drink. And that's what Bill brought to him. But he was not, so he listened to what Bill said, and he's like, this is a good idea. That 9-step, or whatever they called it at the time, the amends process, I'm not really down with that. If I go to these people and I say, I'm an alcoholic and I've like stolen your stuff, and he did what we do, they're not gonna like want me to be their doctor. He was a proctologist, which it's just funny to me, right? So he's like, this is a great idea. They're like talking, and it's going good for a couple days, but he's like, I'm just not gonna do that. And he ended up going on another bender, and he got drunk for 2 weeks, and he came out of that bender, and he called Bill, and he's like, fuck it, I'm ready to do it. Like, let's go. And he did. He went that day and just started making amends. And, he did the majority, so Akron, Ohio, small place. He made like all of his amends in like that day, right? And he came back a free man. And, Bill ended up staying in Akron for like the next 6 months. And he also told Dr. Bob that to keep this, we have to give it away. So they went to a hospital. They asked if there was any alcoholics there. They introduced him to an alcoholic, and kind of God showing that they were on the right path. The very first alcoholic they talked to, the first day he wasn't very receptive. The second day he was like, I'm willing to give this a try. And that was the member number 3. His name is Bill as well. And they knew they were onto something, and they started doing this, and they failed at some. They got some more people, and they started meeting regularly. And like 6 months later, Bill left and went back to New York, and did the same thing in New York. And right, so they have this place in New York. They have a couple meetings in the Ohio area, and they're like the world needs to know about this, right? This is working. It's working for a lot of people that actually do it. And so how are we going to do that? So they ended up writing this book, and with the only intent of showing alcoholics how to get out from under. And, that book was printed, it wasn't printed in 1939, and like everybody was like, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and everything went great. They definitely had their growing pains. In the 50s, they had to come up with the 12 traditions, or the whole thing was going to die. But it took place, and so since then, millions of people have gotten sober. Since then, guided with this book and the 12 steps, NA started, right? Heroin Anonymous started much later. You know, like, I'm sitting here because instead of going to the bar on some night in 1935, Bill walked to a phone booth and said, I need to talk to some alcoholics. And thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, guys. I'm Meg. I'm a heroin addict. So my little topic was from Tyler and Brian's, like how Alcoholics Anonymous started, how Heroin Anonymous actually started. And it was started in Phoenix, Arizona by two men that were bringing a meeting into a halfway house, and there were a bunch of heroin addicts in there, and one of the guys said to the other one, why isn't there a Heroin Anonymous? And so they decided to start it, and the first meeting was in August of 2004 in that halfway house, and from there, I think there were like 8 people at that first meeting, and which is similar to our story. But from there, they formed positions and formed an intergroup, and they wrote the pamphlets and put together meeting formats. And so that's how Heroin Anonymous started and was made possible for us to start it. So am I going?
No,
okay.
you're talking about
Okay, so now we're all going to kind of share our experience with how HA has affected our lives. And, when I was thinking about this, it's very nostalgic. So it was 3 years ago to the day that we had our first Heroin Anonymous meeting in Albany at the A-Frame on Western. And it's awesome to be sitting up here with these two men because we were 3 of the 8 people at the first meeting. And, I had spent 2 years in jails and institutions. And when I got out of supportive living here in Troy, I moved to Albany December 1st of 2014. And I knew a few women, but, I was living in my own apartment for the first time, and I was in a new city, and Brian, really randomly reached out to me and said, hey, we're starting a Heroin Anonymous meeting. Would you like to be a part of it? And, I didn't know who Brian was. I was like, who is this person that's, reaching out to me? And basically, he didn't want it to be like a sausage fest, so he had seen me at Young People's in Albany, and I truly believe it was God working through us that he reached out to me. And so I was like, okay, I'm in a new area, and I need support, and I need meetings. And so I went to the first meeting, and from there, it has, so we were in this small room at the A-Frame, and we quickly grew out of that spot, and so we had to move to our current location on State and Willett. And, any of you guys that go there know that on any given Friday night, we have, 50 to 80 people. And then we decided that we should have a big book format meeting, and so we started the Wednesday night meeting. And then people that were coming to those meetings decided that they wanted meetings in their towns and cities. And so, now there's 2 meetings in Saratoga, and there's one in Schenectady, and one in Troy, and Glens Falls, and so it's just grown from there. And with that, in the name of unity, we started a district meeting. And so it has just grown before our eyes. But with this heroin epidemic, for me, there's nothing like sitting in a room. I'm sitting in this room, and I have not used with any of you. I'm looking out to 4 women I've taken through the steps, and it's it's just so powerful for me, that we've all shared in this common suffering of heroin addiction, and to have a room that we can talk about that openly and honestly. And and then we started bringing meetings into jails and institutions. And, for me to go into Albany County Jail, that was kind of my first dose of meetings when I was in jail. And so for me to be able to give back to these women that are in jail has just been a really powerful experience. And, we go into Spark and St. Mary's, and, it's just given me personally, like, so many service opportunities. For the last 3 years of my life, everyone in my life knows where I will be on Friday night, and that is Heroin Anonymous, and I'm just, like, really grateful for that, and that's what I got.
Thanks, Big. So, again, I'm Brian. I'm a heroin addict.
Hi, Brian.
You guys thought you were done with me the first time, huh? Right. So, all right, I'm going to start with this. It's from the book Alcoholics Anonymous. It's from the chapter Vision for You. I think it kind of tells you what I'm doing here tonight a little bit better than I can. So, it says, "We have shown how we got out from under. You say, yes, I'm willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum, like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? Yes, there is a substitute, and it's vastly more than that. It's the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you." How is that to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? You're going to meet these new friends in your own community near you. Alcoholics are dying helplessly like people in a sinking ship. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds, high and low, which rich and poor. These are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them, you will make lifelong friends. You'll be bound to them with new and wonderful ties. For you will escape disaster together, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself, that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. So, what that means to me is, it's right. So there's 3 parts of this program. The first one is the steps in recovery, and crucial, absolutely super important. It freed me from the obsession to use. And once that happened, it was fantastic. But just like Bill, if that was it, I'd go back to shooting dope, right? Because I'd be freed from it for a very short period of time, and, I'd had no choice. And what I have found since then is the fellowship of Heroin Anonymous. And that's the most important thing in my life today. Right? And so I'm not here to tell you about anything that I've done for Heroin Anonymous, because I haven't done anything for Heroin Anonymous. I'm here to tell you what the fellowship of Heroin Anonymous has done for me. So I'm not going to go into war stories, but I'm going to tell you one story. So I'm a heroin addict, right? I'm living with my mom. It's not very cool. She's like yelling at me or something. So I go outside my house, and I'm just like walking in the street, and I bump into this girl, and right, so this girl lived next to me like since I was very young, like 12 years old, and we were really good friends in high school. I like introduced her to her boyfriend and stuff, and like tight, and we both like drugs, so that was cool. And so like when she was like 21, she just like disappeared. And, so I asked other friends, and they told me that she had moved to Florida, that, she liked putting needles in her arm, and that wasn't too cool. So she went to Florida, and she's trying to get sober. And so she stayed gone for a long time. And so, like, fast forward, I'm 30 some odd years old, and I moved back with my mom. Like I said, I'm a great heroin addict. And I'm walking in the court of my mom's house, and I bump into her. And she sees my arms, and she's like, "I know what's going on there. Can you get me any?" Right? And I truly care about this girl, and I'm like, "No. Didn't you go to Florida and, like, get sober?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she told me that, like, she just got her, like, tonsils out, and she got a couple Percocets, but she's, pretty much sober. But that did something and she wants to continue with it. I was like, no, that's not cool. Like, I'm not going to be the guy that, like, gives you heroin. Like, no. And I meant it, right? I really did. I wasn't going to give her heroin. The next day, I get a bundle, and none of my rigs are working. I can't register. I can't, they won't go in my arm. I can't even pull them back. So I call her up, and I said, you know what, I'll give you dope if you bring me some rigs. And she hadn't shot up in years, right? So she falls out. And, right, so she falls out. She was on the side of my bed, and she just falls on the ground next to me in a crumbled mess. And what do? Right, I don't check and see if she has a pulse. I fix, and I shoot up. Because I can't deal with that, right? Like, fucking dope. Like, I just can't deal with that. So, right, I get high, and I, finally, check on her. She's, barely alive. I, prop her up. I throw, cold washcloths on her. I'm slapping her. And she's not coming to, and I, start freaking out. Like, what am I going to do? So, the fun part of this story is her dad is a very high inspector in the New York State Police Department. Right? So now I can't call 911. I think she's dying, and I'm not doing anything about it. I wish I could, but there's a lot of dope here. There's a lot of needles here. I'm high as fuck. I just can't do that. So I was perfectly okay with letting this girl die on my bedroom floor. And luckily she didn't. She came to, right? And so fast forward, I get sober. I've done the steps. I've had the obsession to drink and use lifted, and right, and I'm just, I've had the obsession to drink and use lifted, and that's great, but I'm not really doing anything. I'm 13 months sober. I'm thinking about how great it is. People should be having a parade for me because I'm sober, and I'm thinking about myself a lot, and my sponsor told me that I have to sponsor people and I have to give back, and I have absolutely no idea how to do that. Right, so I was thinking, well, I will help AA if AA asks. But I'm going to sit in the back of the meetings, right? I'm going to have this, I'll fucking punch you face on if you if you come up to me. And but if they ask, I'm going to help, right? And occasionally I'd go into rehabs and I would tell my story because it would make myself feel good. And that was about as much service I was doing. But my sponsor said, Brian, there's this guy, Bobby, and he's 6 months sober. He's starting to do the deal. You absolutely have to hang out with him. You guys would get along. So, right. Okay, but if Bobby comes up to me, Doug, and says, Brian, let's hang out, I'm perfectly willing to do that. Can't turn down an AA request, but I'm not really going to do anything to make that happen. So Bobby lived close to me. The next day I'm walking to the gym and had these great plans for my day. I was going to go to the gym. I was going to do things that you do at the gym. Then I was going to go to the beach, and I was going to kick it, I was going to give back, right? And so then I see Bobby, and on the other side of the street, he's walking, and I hear my sponsor in my ear, go talk to him, you idiot. And but I really want to go to the gym, if I know if I talk to this guy, these plans aren't going to get carried through. I'm not going to go to the beach. And the song was in, I had my iPod, playing, and it was a really good song, so I don't want to. But I was like, fuck. Everything Doug had told me about these steps and this process has worked, and it's changed my life for the better. So what the hell? I'll go talk to Bobby. And I said, hey, man, I'm Brian. What's up? Doug told me I have to be your friend. You want to hang out? And we started talking. And what happened was we started talking about, so he's a heroin addict like I am, to put needles in my arm. And we talked about that. And then we talked about how when we first started this process, we go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and we just felt different, right? We thought this, and this completely isn't true, but we thought this 50-year-old dude who got 2 DWIs, and that's the only reason he's here, he doesn't know what I'm about, right? I just felt different there, and I felt like I had to center my story and all this stuff, and it was so important to me at the very beginning that I told everyone, I'm a fucking junkie. You don't know, everyone needed to know that I shoot heroin. And it was a huge deal at the beginning. So we talked about that. We talked about Heroin Anonymous, and we knew there was Heroin Anonymous in San Diego. It was an hour and a half from us. And we wanted to go, but nobody was giving either one of us a car. So that wasn't going to happen. So he's like, dude, we should just start a Heroin Anonymous meeting. And I had no idea what that entailed. I knew there was a website that I could go to and like things. But I knew I had some knowledge of this book, that the obsession to use was gone. And, you know, I had some part of God in my life. And we didn't know what we were doing, but we emailed Heroin Anonymous, and they gave us a kit. We found a place to have a meeting. And everything that book said that I started with happened in my life, right? And I had nothing to do. Like, I fucking called, you know, I sent an email. Like, I didn't start a meeting of Heroin Anonymous. Like, God just chose it in my life that this is, like, I had to email these people, and I had to show up at this place the first time. And but everything that happened, that it said it's going to happen, happened for me, you know. And all I had to do to like keep those things, those promises that I read at the beginning, was to continue to like go to Heroin Anonymous, make Heroin Anonymous like a very important thing in my life, do whatever I can for Heroin Anonymous, and right. So I've continued to do that. So we started a second Heroin Anonymous meeting, and I'm like 18 months sober, and I've been looking for that girl, right, that almost died in my bedroom for a while, and I couldn't find her. She wasn't on social media, and I just couldn't find her. I really wanted to make that amends, but I feel really guilty about it. I have no idea how I'd ever make an amends like that, like I was going to let you die because I didn't want to call 911, you know? But I just wanted to make that amends. And like selfishly, I just wanted to call her and be like, I did this, now forgive me, please. Like, I'm awesome now. Like, right? So I couldn't find her. But then the second meeting around us of Heroin Anonymous had started. It was going cool. And all of a sudden she just shows up on Facebook. And I messaged her. I'm like, hey, I got to tell you some things. Can I give you a call? And I called her and I admitted all the things that I had done that day. And, she, you know, obviously as anybody would be, it affected her. And she's like, well, that sucks. You kind of suck, but what's going on with your life now? And I told her about, you know, going to California, doing some steps, starting a meeting of Heroin Anonymous. And she just stopped me right there and she started crying. She's like, that's it, Brian. Like, that's the amends. That's what you do now. Like, just do that. Like, be a part of that. Do whatever you can for that. And, right, so amends, I have to be willing to do whatever that person says. So I did that. And I got forced to move back to Albany, New York. Well, I didn't get forced, you know. Heroin Anonymous had built up a life for me so great in California that after 2 years, my family was finally willing to allow me back in their life. And my boss was finally, you know, like after 2 years, willing to like take me back as an employee because what Heroin Anonymous had done for me. Because I'm the guy that's, you know, to this day, I'm the guy that's going to let that girl die because I'm not calling 911. That's me. You know, Heroin Anonymous has given me all these other things. So after a couple of years, I got to come back to Albany, and I had that amends, right? And I came back, and I told my sister I had to start a meeting of Heroin Anonymous in Albany. That's the amends. It's what I have to do. It's what I agreed to do. And I didn't do that, right? So, like, for a few months, and I'm going crazy, and I'm just thinking about myself. Like, how can I meet girls in Albany? How can I get the cool apartment in Albany? How can I, like, be awesome at my job in Albany? And, like, next thing you know, like, I'm getting restless, irritable, and discontented again. Something has to change or I'm not going to survive. And so what did I do? What did I learn to do? I fucking went on heroinanonymous.org. I emailed them, said I want to start a meeting. I started emailing, so I emailed them, said I want to start a meeting. And I went to Tyler and I was like, hey, Tyler, we're gonna start a meeting of Heroin Anonymous. And Tyler, being amazing like he is, he's like, yep, let's do it. And again, we didn't know anything. We just knew that like there's this book, and if we follow this book, like these things will work out. And right, we did that. And so the A-frame thing, and like, so again, like just all those things started coming true in my life. Like all these promises started coming true in my life because I got the fuck out of the way. I made true on my amends, and I just became a member of Heroin Anonymous. And you know, my life today is amazing because of that. And like, so it was so cool. So we got that first meeting, and you know, like I'm not good at this. Like, you know, my motives have been wrong starting meetings. My motives have been wrong sitting in meetings. You know, like I'm not like a great dude all the time. I've done everything I possibly can do wrong in Heroin Anonymous, and like, thank God you guys haven't kicked me out. But so we decided to start that meeting, at the A-frame. And like 3 days before that meeting started, my friend John said he was talking to this like occupational therapist, and this kid she was working with, he suffered a traumatic brain injury, and like he wanted, like, this sounds awesome for him because he's been thinking about going to like recovery meetings, but like he just felt different, right? And so he's gonna go to this meeting, and he just recently got out of the hospital, and right, so he came to that meeting that night with his mom, and just right then I was like, this is it, we're on the right path, I'm doing exactly what God would have me be. And like the coolest part of that story is that dude is sitting in this meeting today, and he's been sober continuously since then, and it's pretty cool. And that's what the Fellowship of Heroin Anonymous has done for me.
Thanks, Brian.
I'm Tyler, still a heroin addict.
What's up, Tyler?
Yes, I don't know what else I can say, but like, it feels weird sitting up here because like this whole thing, like HA was like, it was like nothing that I did. It was like following God's will and like working a program, and like, like I may have helped like a little bit, but like it was like the newcomers, like who I would see, like the newcomers helped just as much like as I did and as like these guys did. It made it possible for these meetings to grow and reach like 3 years in this area, and it's crazy. I remember like recently looking at the meeting list, and I